terrorist tribute!
Sorry if I spoiled anyone, but the movie has been out for about a decade, so... The Hunger Games is a very iconic franchise, and both the movies and the books hold a very special place in my heart. Ever since the release of Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I feel like the entire Hunger Games community has reawakened. And as much as I love this community, I have to say that there is something, or rather someone, we need to talk about. Gale, otherwise known as the Prim Reaper. Gale has received so much hate. Take a look at some of these videos.
I am not.
I woke up in a new.
It is hot as hell in this funky ass, hot ass room I'm in. Is that the Grim Reaper?
I don't think that the hate that Gale receives is entirely fair. And honestly, I understand if you've only seen the movies, Gale's character is portrayed as very one-dimensional. However, if you've read the books, you know that he's a lot more complex than he seems. That being said, I do think that the Prim Reaper jokes are incredibly funny, and I urge you to keep making them. So, let's talk about Gale. Let's start at the beginning. Gale and Katniss are set up as mirrors of each other. Gale is who Katniss would have become had she not gone into the Hunger Games. Think about it. The parallels between their characters are undeniable. Both of them lose their dads in the same mining accident and are left caring for their families, whose mothers are incapacitated to some degree. Katniss's mom is left in a catatonic state, while Gale's mother is pregnant. When this happens, Katniss was 11 and Gale was 13, and they both have younger siblings to take care of. Katniss has Prim, who she loves more than life itself, and Gale shares this exact same kind of love with his siblings, Rory, Vic, and Posey. Before moving forward, I feel the need to emphasize the fact that Gale and Katniss are children throughout the entirety of the events of the Hunger Games. By the end of Mockingjay, without counting the epilogue, Katniss is 18 and Gale is 20 years old. Listen, when I turned 20, I also thought I was an adult, but now I know better. They meet each other about a year later after the mine explosions, while Katniss is out hunting in the woods. Something considered very much illegal in any district, as it's considered stealing the capital's property. This is a big pain point for both of them. Their families are starving. They have nothing to eat. District 12 is one of the poorest districts in all of Panem, and they lived in the equivalent of the slums, also known as the Seam. Now, stealing from the capital is punishable by death, so every time they go out and try to provide for their families, they live under the threat of being killed every single day. At the beginning, they were very distrustful of each other, but they soon realized that them helping each other out is for their benefit. While Katniss's weapon is the bow, Gale is incredibly smart at setting traps and snares. Slowly but surely, they begin to trust each other, since they recognize that they both want to keep their family safe, eventually becoming best friends. Katniss tells us that when she was younger, she would scare her mother with some of the things that she would say about the capital in District 12, so she eventually learned to hold her tongue. This is something else they shared in common. They both had a deep-rooted hatred for the capital and their situation. The woods were their safe space, where they felt free to express their opinions about their circumstances and be able to rant to each other. Now, there is a character in the books that does not appear in the movies, Madge Undersea. She is the daughter of District 12's mayor. In the book, she's actually the one that gives Katniss her Mockingjay pin, which does not happen in the movies. In the movies, it is Gracie Say that eventually gives that to Katniss. The morning of the reaping, Katniss and Gale are out in the woods, where they find a patch of strawberries. And knowing that the mayor has a love for strawberries and that he would pay a fair price, they go over to his house and try to sell him the strawberries. When they arrive at the mayor's house, they're actually greeted by Madge. This is when Gale falls for the capital's trap. Madge begins to joke about the fact that she's dressed so nice just in case she gets reaped and sent to the capital. This joke just rubs Gale the wrong way, See, Madge is at the top of the merchant class in District 12. And while the merchant class is also engulfed by poverty, not nearly as much as the people of the Seam. So she likely never had to take out Tesserae. The reaping worked like this. When you turn 12, your name is entered into the reaping once. When you turn 13, twice. And so on until you turn 18, when your name is entered automatically 7 times into the reaping. But say your family is starving and you're desperate for a way to provide for them. This is where Tesserae comes in. Tesserae? Tesserae. Tesserae.
It's the Mahajapit, Majahapit, Mapajahit, Mahapajit, Mapajahit, Majapahit.
I don't know. English is not my first language. Let's skip over that. Tesserae is a year's worth supply of oil and grains. Enough for one person. So say you have a family of 5 people that you have to provide for. Then you'll likely take out more Tesserae in order to provide for them. However, it comes at a price. You have to enter your name more times into the reaping. So for the 74th Hunger Games, when Katniss is 16, her name is entered a total of 20 times in the reaping. Gale, who is 18, has 42 entries. And Madge will likely only have 5 entries, since she's never had to take out Tesserae and she's 16 years old. So you can understand Gale's anger over something like that. But this is exactly what the Capitol wants. It's War 101. Divide and conquer. The class difference between the merchants and the people of the Seam is designed to create an air of animosity, so that they won't unite with each other. It's there to create an us versus them type of mentality. Gale does realize this. He even tells Katniss in one of his rants out in the woods that he understands that Tesserae is a tool to create more anger between the people of the same district. And yet he can't seem to help it. I have to say, it is very ironic to me, the fact that he's supposed to be a genius with traps and snares, and yet he falls so easily for one of the Capitals. But honestly, can you blame him? With all of this in common, you can kind of understand how they are almost the same character at the beginning. But then, Prim's name is called at the reaping, and everything changes. So at this point, Gale is already very much in love with Prim? No.
Just make sure you hide your little sister from him.
At this point, Gale is already very much in love with Katniss. This isn't said explicitly in the books, mainly because the books are narrated by Katniss and she's a very unreliable narrator. Plus, she couldn't tell you who loved her even if they hit her right in the face. There are actually so many instances of her not knowing how much people love her in the books that I could make an entirely different video on that. In the words of Brad Boy himself, she has no idea the effect she can have. I mentioned Gale's love for Katniss because when Prim's name is called and Katniss volunteers to take her place, Gale wants to volunteer for Peeta so that he can go into the arena and try to help to protect Katniss. But he knows that if he volunteers, Katniss would never forgive him. This is because they had a pact that if one of their names was called at the reaping, the other would take care of the other's family. And Katniss tells us from the very beginning that she's not the forgiving type, given she was talking about her mother in that instance, but it applies here all the same. So when he is forced to say goodbye to Katniss, his anger towards the Capitol only keeps growing. If you think about it from his perspective, the girl he loves just got called into the arena to fight to death. He doesn't know if she's gonna make it back alive. He is forced to stay back in District 12. He can't go with her because he promised he would take care of her family, and the only reason why he had to take care of her family is because of a system that was designed to keep the people of District 12, and honestly of every district, in poverty. And then during the games, Katniss is forced to play the girl in love, and he is then forced to pretend to be her cousin, severing the only possibility that they could be together, at least publicly, in Gale's mind. I'm not talking about Katniss here, this is purely Gale. Them being branded as cousins doesn't actually happen in the movies, and if it does, I think it just gets glossed over. It's truly in the books that you can tell this. And the reason for the Capitol to lie about this is so that there would be no doubt about Katniss's love for Peeta. After they get back from the Hunger Games, Haymitch has to break it to Katniss that in order to keep everyone she loves safe, she has to remain with Peeta for the rest of her life. She has a full breakdown over this, and it really isn't about who she is marrying, but rather the fact that they are taking away her ability to choose. Sound familiar? That was the one freedom they actually had in District 12, to be able to choose who to marry. And now this freedom has been taken away from her. That decision, out the window. And the same thing applies for Gale. And he's also so angry that he has to perform for the people of the capital. Both Katniss's and his anger towards the capital keep growing, but in different ways. During her journey to and from the Hunger Games, both times, Katniss comes in close contact with a lot of different people from the capital. It is through people like Cinna and Effie and Portia that she begins to understand that her assumptions and biases towards these people have been wrong. Gale, however, doesn't have the closeness that Katniss has to the people of the capital. In fact, he even gets mad at Katniss for defending her prep team back in District 13. But we'll get into District 13 a little later. Gale, like all of us, has a fatal flaw: pride. After the 74th Hunger Games, Katniss becomes incredibly rich, and yet Gale refuses to let her help him. Gale is forced to enter District 12's industry, coal mining. This now takes a lot of his time, and he's not able to go out hunting nearly as much anymore. So yes, Gale is sent to work in the mines, in the same place where his father died. Katniss often tells us that she has nightmares of her reimagining her dad's death over and over again. And it's part of the reason why she feels so uncomfortable in District 13, which is underground. Gale was also a child back then, so who's to say he didn't have the exact same type of nightmares that Katniss did? And yet he's forced back into the place where his father was ripped from him. And things in District 12 keep getting more and more expensive. Unbeknownst to Gale and Katniss, this is due to some of the rebellions and uprisings in other districts. Gale is forced to work extra hours, and Gale's brother, who is now turned 12, now has to take out Tezzeret, which is exactly what Gale wanted to avoid in the first place. And Katniss has the monetary ability to help him and his family. Remember that. In one of his very few hunting trips in between shifts at the mine, he hunts down a wild turkey. The new head peacekeeper finds out about this, and Gale is whipped almost to death. And yet he still refuses help. His pride is what comes to bite him in the every single time. And it's also part of the reason why Prim is dead. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When Katniss tells Gale that there are talks of rebellion in other districts, something changes in Gale. He had been mad at the capital for so long, without any clue what to do about it, until now. When he hears this, his anger transforms into hope. But this is when Katniss is forced back into the arena because of the quarter quell. And that brief moment of hope is shattered because the woman he loves is in danger again. And he can't do anything about it. Again. As he is watching Katniss in the arena shooting that arrow into the air, the camera's cut to black, and he is left not knowing if she is alive or dead. Then all hell breaks loose in District 12. The capital has sent out the equivalent of Order 66.
Execute Order 66.
But instead of Jedis, it's everyone from 12. So Gale gathers everyone he can and guides them to the safety of the woods, including his and Katniss's family. And his entire district is decimated. He is now seeing in full scale what the capital is actually capable of. Everything he had ever known or loved about District 12 is gone. And afterwards, he's the one that has to tell Katniss that there is no longer a District 12. You can tell how much this affected him when him, Katniss, and the crew went back to revisit District 12 and he had to recount everything that happened.
I should have grabbed people. I should have dragged them with me. Some of the kids I could have carried.
You saved so many people, Gale. Without you, there'd be no District 12, not even the memory of it.
That's how you create extremists. Let's rewind a little bit. When Gale is whipped, Katniss realizes that there is no hope in trying to escape. It's pointless. They will never be truly free. But even then, she's terrified. Not really for herself, but for the people she loves. Scared that the capital will use them to hurt her, Prim being at the top of that list. As she's trying to find the courage to join the fight, she realizes that the capital has already hurt Prim and admits to herself that finding courage won't be very hard for Gale because he was born a rebel. The surviving people of District 12 find their way to District 13, which they believed didn't exist anymore, that it was decimated by the capital during the Dark Days. District 13 was now underground and under the rule of Alma Coin. It turns out that the people of District 13 had kept their heads down after the Dark Days, waiting for another chance at rebellion. The people in 13 are extremely frugal because their resources are very limited, and they live in this sort of militarized state. Gale, now in 13, is given a purpose, a way to fight back. They even reward him with his own communicative, which is a symbol of status in District 13. He takes pride in the fact that he's one of the few that has what it takes to be a soldier. So I guess you could say that now he was a rebel with a cause. Sorry, that was bad. But things in 13 are not much better than in the capital. Anyone over the age of 14 is considered a soldier in District 13. How is that any better than the capital sending 12-year-olds off to die in the arena? In some ways, District 13 is even more controlling than the capital. Don't believe me? Katniss's old prep team is shackled to a wall, naked and visibly tortured. Katniss even points out that there's a drain in the middle of this very sterile room, and she doesn't want to know why. You know why they were shackled? For stealing a piece of bread. Like I mentioned before, District 13, militarized and have very few resources. All they wanted to do was take an extra piece of bread, and that's their punishment?
Stole a loaf of bread.
Katniss points out that Coin tortured her prep team in order to send a message to her, that she's the one that has all the power in District 13. But this is when Gale is blinded by his newfound purpose and his pride in what he's doing. He tells Katniss that she's probably imagining the message that she's receiving from Coin. Yes, lying piece of he's a man. Were we expecting any better? Gale demonstrated his value to the revolution, creating plans of attack with Beetee. Beetee is the one to point out in the books, and I quote, thinking like his prey. That's where he finds their vulnerability. It is with Beetee that he ends up creating the plan that later on kills Prim. Set up an attack, wait for first responders, hit them again. At this point in the revolution, most of the districts are now in control of the rebels, except for District 2. The people of District 2 sided with the capital during the rebellion. I truly think that this is because they didn't feel as oppressed as other districts, and even if that's the case, I think they might have believed that if they helped the capital, they would be rewarded accordingly. It is within the mountain nicknamed the Nut, that the capital's military was kept. The rebels are having a really hard time trying to defeat those in District 2, since the Nut is considered impenetrable. This is when Gale comes in. Gale is tasked with helping defeat District 2, and he comes up with a plan that would trap all the people inside the Nut. It is very clear to Katniss that Gale is willing to sacrifice every single person in there. Gale is angry. He's angry at the people of District 2 for joining and helping the capital in the first place. So angry that he's willing to let them all die. Katniss, on the other hand, finally understands what Cato realized at the end of the 74th Hunger Games.
Go on. Anyway.
That at the end of the day, they are all the capital's slaves. It doesn't matter whose side they choose to be on. Katniss even tries to reach out to Gale in his rage, saying that with his kind of thinking, he could justify anything, like sending kids to the Hunger Games. And she's right. Gale's anger is leading him to do some of the same things that he hated from the capital. After defeating District 2, Katniss and the Star Squad are sent to the capital. On their way to assassinate President Snow, Katniss realizes something. That the children of the capital are being offered asylum at the president's mansion, but that this is just a ruse, so that they can create a sort of human shield for President Snow, hoping to protect him from any rebel attacks. But this is when the parachutes that were used in the arena to deliver gifts dropped down onto the crowd of mainly children. In the arena, getting a parachute meant a gift. It was good, so they were expecting it to be something good from the capital. Instead, they get bombed. Then, first responders, Prim included, dropped down to help the people that were injured. And then the second strike hits. That's when Prim dies. When Katniss later asks Gale if it was one of their bombs, he claims he doesn't know. And honestly, I believe him.
Is that you?
I don't know. All I know is I was supposed to take care of your family.
Yes, it was the plan that he had designed with Beetee. But the first part of the attack looked like it had been orchestrated by the Capitol. They were parachutes, which the Capitol often used. They were dropped from a Capitol plane, but it also could have been a strategy from the rebels. But at the end of the day, the damage is still the same. Prim is dead. Not only is Katniss never gonna be able to forgive him for his involvement in the bombings, but I don't think Gale is ever gonna be able to forgive himself. He loved Prim. Loved her. He didn't just protect her for Katniss' sake. He considered her family. Personally, I think that the bombing was most definitely a rebel attack. So, is Gale the Prim Reaper? Have I even taken my meds? Is Gale the Prim Reaper? Kind of. I mean, he's one of the Prim Reapers, but there were more people involved with Prim's death. Beetee was the one that encouraged Gale to set his trap in the first place. Boyne was the one that sent out Prim, who was 13 at the time, even by District 13 standards. She was not old enough to be considered a soldier. She wasn't meant to be out in the field. The reality is, Coin wanted Katniss out of the picture. She didn't need the Mockingjay anymore, and since Katniss wasn't willing to support her in her claim to be president of Panem, she was a threat, because she had support of so many people in the districts. So how do you get rid of her? Take away the thing she loves most. Then there's the Capitol, that created the entire system that led to the rebellion in the first place. They were the reason why, at age 12, Prim was reaped for the Hunger Games and why Katniss had to volunteer. And yes, Gale is also to blame. Did he intend for Prim to be there in one of his traps? No, he didn't. But he still created those plans with the intent to hurt someone. Overall, Gale is a kid who was pushed to his breaking point by his situation and his deep love for those around him. He was raised in a world where misery and hunger and impotence rule. He kept living traumatic events over and over and over again. And yes, Katniss did too, I agree. But his anger and his pride get the best of him. And yes, he was jealous of Peeta because of the whole love triangle thing, but his character goes so much further than that. His anger and his quest for justice was far greater than his love for Katniss could ever be. Do I agree with Gale's actions? No, but I do understand them. Gale is a cautionary tale that if you let yourself get overrun by anger, you will end up becoming the thing that you hated in the first place.
You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Anyway, marry the guy that drops baby bombs, not bombs on babies. Okay, bye!